John from HorsePower Ranch. Today we're going to join a project that I started before I had the camera, and the project is installing a set of AMP Research power steps on my 78 Ford pickup. Again, I didn't have the camera at the beginning, so throughout the video I tried to go back and talk about some of the things that I tried that didn't work, try to cover the process of what had to be done before getting to the point of where I'm at when I started the video, so that hopefully if you watch the video you can see all of the different things that were needed to get the steps to be installed on my truck. At the end of the video I'll include some part numbers. I talk about in the video a number of the reasons why I picked the parts that I did. There's a number of ways that these steps can be installed. In fact, the reason I picked these steps was because there were a number of posts online of other people installing them on their 73 to 79 Ford pickups. So I knew that it would fit, although in all the posts everybody just said that they built brackets and there was no description of the brackets. And now, having built a set of the brackets, I'll tell you it's not as easy as you might think it was going to be. In the end, hopefully this is helpful if you're planning on installing a set of steps on your truck. And if you have a better way, post it and let me know. But enjoy. All right, so here we have the step installed with just a piece of angle iron without the angle iron bent down. And it's what I expected of what is going to happen, and that is that the step is not flat. If you look, it's at an angle. And holding this level out there, you can see it's quite a bit of an angle. So what I'm going to work on now is figuring out what the actual change in height is across this step, so that I can make that same angle on my bracket so that this step will end up becoming level. So if I take a level, hold it across, and then measure this, the step is 6 inches deep and the current rise is 1.5 inches to get to level. So over 6 inches across, I lose 1.5 inches. Okay, so as I said, the width across this is 6 inches, the rise is 1.5 inches, meaning that this drops 1.5 inches. Now the angle iron that I'm using, the rise on it, or the flat slope on it, is only 1.5 inches. So this is equivalent to the width of this right here, but it's only 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches happens to be 1/4 the distance of this. So I have to take 1/4 of the elevation or the drop out of this when I bend it. And so 1/4 of 1.5 inches is 3/8 of an inch. All right, so I've marked about 1 inch away from each of the holes, and I'm going to cut back to where the angle iron joins, and then I'll get my oxyacetylene torches out. So what I have here is a spacer that I measured that was exactly 3/8 of an inch. I've got my cuts in the metal. I have this set up so that after the pipe's hot, I can use this to bend this up. And I'm getting my gloves on now. I don't know if it's obvious on the camera, but one of the things that ended up happening is the bend started occurring a little bit towards this lip, which I guess should be expected. It's hard to get all that heat in there. So I didn't go quite up to the full 3/8 of an inch because my bend radius started earlier, and I'm kind of eyeballing it now, but that feels like the right slope to correct the angle. And worst case, I can take it off, heat it up again, and massage it a little more. All right, so with that bend, which wasn't measured, it was kind of just estimated, it did really well. If you look, perfectly level is right there. You get a little bit of weight on it, might come down just a little bit. A lot of that we can adjust with the top bolt. And then if you look at what it looks like when it goes up, it tucks really tight right now. I mean, as tight as you would want it. In fact, that the line that comes around the bottom here is just nearly perfect. I will have to put the motor in to see how far up it goes. There is maybe a chance that if it tries to go up higher than that, it looks like it's actually going to be touching right here. Now remember, I'm putting these extra long steps on so that when I do the crew cab, they'll reach to the end of the cab, and then I'll slide the step back a little bit, but I don't want to cut it now, which is what you would normally do on a super cab. So, but it looks like I got it. It looks like that angle is going to work just fine. I'm excited. All right, we're going to take a look at the underside of the truck, and if you look on the back corner of the cab here, up underneath you see this rail that's between the outer edge of the truck and then where it goes up into the cab, and that's what I'm using to attach my bracket to. If you look up in here, you'll see that I've drilled the holes, like that one hole right there. Now the other holes are from a different stage of the project, but what I tried to do is to put a supporting bracket right underneath where one of the body supports attaches to that rail, meaning that that's the strongest spot. So at 4 different locations underneath here, and then up here in the front. Now, one of the things after you go past this last body rail right here, actually back here, so once you, just before it, at this rail, what you see is this goes from a thicker kind of, you can see that there are 2 pieces of metal on the outside that are pressed together to where this lip comes down, and at that point, at least on my truck, it's not as straight. So what I found is that when I bolt this piece in, it kind of pulls those pieces out. Now, I don't know if mine's just exceptionally, I don't want to call it poor, but, not straight, or if that's the way all of them will be. But I would expect that others would be kind of the same, where you're going to have to pull this part of the body out with the bolts as you attach the mounting bracket. All right, so what I'm going to do now is take my welder and weld these 2 sides here, then turn it over and do on the inside. So I will strengthen this piece. The nice part is welding this right here is going to strengthen the overall piece too. One of the power steps have a motor on it, and the motor faces up. And one of the things that I found is that near the front of the truck, which is where I had the arm with the motor, there's not enough room. So I had to take everything apart and put it back in, and then make sure that it was going to fit back here in the back of the truck. And it does fit just fine in the back. All right, the step's installed. I think it looks great. I like the way that this follows kind of the body line up. If you really look at that, it almost looks like it was just perfectly laid out for the truck. One of the things that I have noticed is that even though I held the bracket when I was building it all the way up flush against the bottom of the truck, it's resulted in a gap of about a 1/4 inch more down there than here. So to fix that, when I build the other side, I'll build that 1/4 inch into the bracket, but on this side, I'll take it apart and oblong the holes a little bit progressively as I get ready to bolt that back on, so that this side will sit down a little bit more. So if you see that the step is normally in its upright position, if I take the signal wire here, and this would signal as if your door were to open. So if I take that and just touch the ground wire, the step comes down. I'm really happy with where it sits. I mean, it's perfectly level. And then when you close the door or the signal goes away, there's a slight delay and the step goes back up. You can see right now it does hit just a little bit back here in the back of the truck. So lowering that down a quarter inch will help resolve that too. Ideally, this step shouldn't even go all the way back onto the box or the bed of the truck. But because I'm going to be running these on my crew cab, I don't want to shorten them and then have to buy new steps when I get the crew cab on the body. So by lowering this down that quarter of an inch, that will help prevent that from touching too. So one more time. Door open, door closed, slight delay, and it goes up. All right, I wanted to do a quick description of how I mounted the angle iron to the cab. On this side, I had the advantage of seeing that I had to lower the back end to make it so that the steps are level by that quarter inch. And so I've done that. But one of the things that's hard is you can't pre-drill your angle iron. You can't pre-drill this and then you'll drill the other side because it's blind. You can't get into this side. You have to get to everything from over here. So what I did, as you can see, was take some clamps, some C-clamps, and clamp it in place, and then make sure that I had my height difference that I wanted, where it slightly drops down in the back to make it so I don't have the same problem on my head on the other side. Then what I was going to do is to come in here and drill the holes as I had before, 4 of them up here in near each of the main chassis supports, and then take it off and finish making the rest of the cuts. Okay, on the Chevy truck, there's an upper bracket that would normally mount. The bracket would mount up there. So then this bracket would mount to the top up here. What I'm going to do is to turn this upside down and then bend this so that I can bolt it to my plate right over there. Okay, here's the modified bent bracket installed and bolted to the top, and that's where I'll drill the hole and then run the bolt through to the outside to hold the top of the motor. So now all I have to do is take that back out and build 3 more of them. So what came with the original amp step are these brackets that bolt this piece in using lag bolts, which I never really liked the idea of using lag bolts anyway. You drill the holes and then this would be at an angle like that, and then this piece would come up into it, and then you would attach the bolt to the top of the motor, and that's what would keep the motor rigid on the top. What I had to do because of clearance reasons was to take that same piece and put a bend in it. So if you look at the 2 of them side by side, a little bit of a bend. The front motors need a little bit more of a bend. So what I need to do now is make another rear bracket. Go. All right, we'll see if this actually makes the video or not, but I have to test the steps now that they're fully bolted on, and what better way to do it than up on the hoist? Well, they felt plenty strong. All right, so I thought I would talk about the finished product, and before that, I thought I'd show some of the pieces that I tried, different attempts before for making the part. I originally tried to make the adapters, the mounting brackets out of a piece that I would bolt on the inside. That unfortunately moved the step too far inside. I ended up another challenge that I ran into was that when you had more than one, so with these two here bolted on the inside, because of how the step needs to be perfectly straight, if one of these was even crooked by a little bit, you couldn't get the step back in. So this was not, I mean, it could have worked, but I like where I ended up getting to in the end, and that is I used 2 1/4-inch thick, 5 foot long, 2.5 by 1.5 angle iron that fits perfectly up in the rail, up inside underneath the cab of the truck. And then I had to put this bend, which I showed earlier, to make it so that the step would come out, square. I took the brackets that came with the Chevy kit and then bent them custom. I've numbered them so that when I'm going to get everything powder coated, I'll mark them differently, of course, so that I can tell what they are after they're done being powder coated. But that way I can mount these to the top of the motors to hold the top of the step in. And in the end, I'll have this strength of the angle iron that will be mounted and bolted in 6 different locations along that rail underneath the truck. And then the steps mounted to this 1/4-inch angle iron, which is by all accounts much stronger than anything that you would get in the, like from the factory. You're not going to have anything that thick to bolt stuff to. A couple thoughts. I bought the steps new. The reason that these steps get selected a lot to use on conversions is that they're readily available. There's lots of people that have lots of the amp steps on Chevy crew cabs, and so when you try to find one used, it's fairly simple. It's easier to find these than others. There might be another step that you could put in that would be much easier, wouldn't require as much fabrication. I don't know. I just bought the step that other people had said they could make work. This came with it. If you ever buy a used step, you're not going to get it. It's not a big deal. All you have to do is just hold the step on the top and mark the holes, and you could do the exact same thing. It was kind of a nice thing to have. If you get a used step, there's a chance that somebody will have forgotten to put these pieces in there, but once again, fairly simple to make. In fact, you wouldn't even really need a slot on the end in here. If you marked it where you needed it, you could just drill the hole in the right spot and make your own pieces. So really a pretty easy conversion. It was easier with everything being new. I'm super happy with how everything fit. Can't wait to get it powder coated and get everything bolted back on. What I really can't wait is to get the crew cab and get that put back on, so that instead of it doing all this work on my existing cab, but to actually have the full crew cab in the truck.